Hello, and welcome to the webinar, Why You Need Cybersecurity Cross Training, courtesy of LMG Security and the Red Team Alliance. My name is Jeremy Smith. I'm a journalist and I'm a writer, and my most recent book is called Breaking and Entering, and it is about Sherry, one of our panelists, and I'm also the host of a spin-off podcast called The Hacker Next Door, starring in part Deviant, my other panelist. I may point to them. They may be in opposite screen directions for you, so forgive my Brady Bunch miscues. Anyway, I'm your moderator today, and I'm excited. We're going to have a great conversation. These are great storytellers as well as super pros. Before we start the program, I want to give you some housekeeping info. First, we encourage you to use the computer audio feature of the webinar. During the program, if you experience any audio interference, no problem. Just consider the optional phone connection, which is listed in the audio tab of the webinar interface if you get static or feedback. Second, and even more important, we're going to have a Q&A. That's always my favorite part. The questions I don't know are coming and the answers they don't know they're going to give at the end. And you can submit those anytime using the Q&A tab in the webinar interface, or you can save them to the end. That'll be about a half hour after into our conversation. And the webinar video will be available after the event, and you'll get a notification of that once the video is live. And last, definitely not least, super helps us to get feedback. A survey is going to be available to you at the conclusion of the webinar. So please take that opportunity to let us know what you loved and what we can improve on. So without further ado, I'm going to let you know who's going to be doing most of the talking. Our presenters today are Deviant Olaf. Don't let how it's spelled fool you. And Sherry Davidoff. Their names actually almost rhyme, I'm just realizing. Sherry is the CEO of LMG Security. As a recognized expert in cybersecurity and data breach response, she has been called a security badass by the New York Times. Her new book, Data Breaches, Crisis and Opportunity, is available now, and her professional experiences are featured in my wonderful book, Breaking and Entering, The Extraordinary Story of a Hacker Called Alien. Check that out too. And Sherry is certified in about 1 million different high-tech specialties, from forensic examination to penetration testing. And she got her degree in computer science and electrical engineering from MIT. Deviant pays the bills as a physical penetration specialist with the core group and director of education for the Red Team Alliance. And he's also a member of the board of directors of the US division of TOOL, TOOL, the Open Organization of Lockpickers. At multiple security conferences, he started and helps organize today Lockpick Village workshop areas, and he's trained Black Hat, SANS, and other attendees in physical security, as well as the FBI, the NSA, the US Naval Academy, the US Military Academy. And in his spare time, he enjoys loud moments with lead acceleration and quiet times with podcasts. And he arrives at airports too early, shows up at parties too late, but will appear right on time for tacos and whiskey. And I have certainly witnessed all of those attributes in my short time getting to hang out and follow Deviant online and off. So you all know, and that's why you're here, that physical and cybersecurity are intertwined. If you're outcome oriented, it's how do you get the insider access, or how do you stop the outsiders from getting your insider access? And those are just two of the core routes of entry, and dividing them into silos doesn't make sense if you want to be safe or if you want to be crafty at getting in. So Deviant your specialty is physical red team testing. Sherry, your area of expertise is cybersecurity and data breaches. And I have 3 questions for you guys before we get into the Q&A to lead us off. But first, you two are collaborating on a training event the week of June 23rd. Is that right? As I see in
That's correct.
handouts. Is that what's going on?
Yeah, it's exciting.
We are doing our first collaborative event. We're running both of our classes virtually for the first time. So my class is on data breaches. How do you respond to a data breach to minimize risk? We do hands-on exercises where you actually handle a ransomware case, cloud data breach, and an internal malware hack. And then you walk through how to respond, analyze it, handle the investigation. But I'm really excited because usually, Deviant, when we see each other, it's at conferences and our classes are at the same time.
Right.
So I only see like 3 minutes of your classes, and now your class is the 2 days after my class. So I don't know if I've told you this, but I'm going to take your class. I'm so excited. So
Absolutely.
why don't you tell us about your class?
Yeah, so our class, which as Sherry points out, is concatenated, not stacked atop hers this session, so you can register for both, is about electronic access control systems, physical access control systems. Many people, when they see me, they associate me as like that lockpicker guy, which fine, it's part of my reputation, but they think that if they went to their boss and said, hey, I'm gonna pay for this class on lockpicking, they like, really? Come on, that's a hobby, isn't it? But buildings today are moving more and more to relying almost exclusively on their electronic access controls. The use of mechanical keys, like you might have a key, in the sock somewhere, and we'll talk about that in a story, that opens doors, but who's using a physical key, right? Badge access control systems, electronic and RFID access controls are what we talk about. We talk about cloning, copying, compromising, bypassing, the front surface on the reader, the back end on the wire and the bus that leads back to the door controller. And it's something that it's not unachievable. This kind of knowledge is something you can pick up in just a couple days and really augment other sorts of testing and evaluation you're doing, either as an offensive practitioner or just shoring up your own security posture at your company.
I've had the experience of literally running between Sherry and Deviant's Black Hat workshops on these topics. So I am envious of all of you that you can enjoy them in the right order and together rather than having to sort of split your mind and your time between the two. So we'll touch base and give you a little more info on how to learn more about that class if you don't already know at the end. But let's get into the conversation. So I'm kind of I'll call it maybe happy, sad, happy order in my questions, or success, failure, success order. So first question for each of you, can you tell me about a time when you were successful in your own area of expertise? So hopefully this happens every day, but what's one example? And I don't know who wants to go, who wants to go first?
You should go first.
Oh, no, you.
Okay. So as most people know, I'm very physical focused in terms of what my firm does. That is our bread and butter. So many jobs, our clients are only interested in can you physically get into the space? What assets can you find or compromise? And it was a really interesting moment when we tried to show we'd already kind of gotten in a few different places, and this building out here was a big corporate campus. And we said, okay, we've got up to these floors. But this one building, they said, that's the building where their SOC is, right? And once you're on the job for a few evenings and you've gotten some successes, you're like, all right, let's really get emboldened here and let's see if we can push it. So we said, all right, how fast can we be street to SOC? And between myself and my other 2 partners in the firm, Bobak and Robert, it was something like 5 to 6 minutes for the following things to transpire, right? Robert found a door on the outside of the building that was exploitable, was able to kind of run up from the vehicle, get in position, and was about to open the door. And he thought, okay, I'm on the handle, I'm ready. This is an under door attack if you've never seen this. Bobak runs up with a small step stool, throws it down because he knew from the other buildings what door sensors they were using. So he's ready to mask the sensor. He gets above Robert's head. Okay, go. Robert hits the door. Bobak masks the sensor. No alarms. We're in. The next door, Robert does the exact same thing. So they just had the same door. You know, you had the kind of a vestibuled system. We had to badge, 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 but same door, bam, again. Now I'm behind them carrying another bag of equipment. We're running through the building, and Robert had seen a blueprint at a different part of the office. He said, okay, well, I'm pretty sure the SOC it's the same building design. It's going to be this room, turns the corner, labeled right on the door, same exact door handle, same song, third verse, hits that. And we're in the SOC. At this point, you know, 4 minutes have maybe transpired, maybe 3. And we're looking at each other, what else can we do? And I looked down and I saw a safe on the ground. And it turns out that this safe had a flaw. It was able to be bypassed. This is just so I'm not this cool. I mean, I'm a safe technician.
So cool.
This was like a hardware store safe, many of which have a lot of vulnerabilities and weaknesses. I didn't have to manipulate this safe. I was able to bypass it open. And they were using this safe for storage of, among other things, the master keys for the building were in there. So at this point, we didn't have to underdoor our way to any doors. We could just use keys. We could even come back during the day and look like we belonged. There were badges, electronic badges, one of which was actually called, quote, the backup SOC badge, in case, quote, something went down and there's an emergency, which none of that makes sense, and I'll explain why later. But my favorite part was they had on the wall their big phone tree of like emergency contacts. This is what you do in the event of this, and they had policies. But in the safe, they had like the managers and the security directors' personal phone numbers, as like they didn't want just that on the wall because people come in and out of the SOC at different levels, but they didn't want these private cell phone numbers. Well, it's not like we were going to call them at 3 in the morning, but we spoofed calls and texts to other people at like 4 or 5 in the morning, being like, hey, I was getting these alerts last night. What's going on? Can you do a remote, authorization of this? We're going to have a team come out from, Pico, and they're going to be doing some electrical work. I need you there. I'm sorry to bother you. Got to get in early. Respond if you can do this. So hopefully they didn't respond to the guy at 5 in the morning. But yeah, somebody was out there to meet us. We got in the next day, had keys that we said the city had given us, and it was great. It's kind of where we eat.
All right, Sherry, you got to top that.
Why did I want to go second? Well, okay, I do a lot of different things, and I thought maybe I'll change it up a little bit and talk about some of the ransomware cases that we've been handling, because actually, I don't know if you guys know, for the past few years, LMG has been really developing an expertise in ransom negotiation and recovery, and also threat hunting. So we had a law firm, and actually this was before we started working with them. The law firm was hit with doppelpaymer ransomware, and there was a ransom demand of $60,000. So at the time, it was fairly high dollar ransom, but they were lucky. They had full and complete backups. And so they made the mistake that many organizations do, where they say, okay, we're just going to restore from backups and move on. We're not really going to do an investigation. It'll all be good. So of course, what they didn't realize, which we found out later, was that there was a banking Trojan on their network. They got a call about a week later from the FBI. It was an evening during the week. And the FBI rings them up and gives them this really like vague and disturbing message. They said, hey, your servers were identified as communicating with command and control servers that are known bad actors. So they're related to an organized crime group. Again, later, after we got involved, we found that it was the Dridex banking Trojan, and Dridex is run by a group called Evil Corp, which is so awesome. So apparently their servers had this banking Trojan and were communicating with Evil Corp. And at the time, it makes sense that they got this call from the FBI, because there was like this huge international manhunt going on. Interpol is like prioritizing capturing the Evil Corp leadership. And they did actually indict the Evil Corp leaders. I believe they are still located in Russia, so they were never actually extradited or anything like that, of course. But the main leader of Evil Corp had stolen at least $100 million that we know of. So anyway, this is what this poor law firm on the East Coast is up against. It's Evil Corp is in control of their systems and they don't know it. So they get this call on like a Wednesday night and they think, okay, we're gonna deal with this first thing tomorrow morning, which is like the other big mistake. So of course, what happens, they come in first thing Wednesday morning and all of their systems are locked up again with ransomware the second time. And this time the criminals are pissed because they had already locked it up a first time and they had to do double work, darn it. So they upped the ante. They charged almost $300,000 as a demand the second time. And bad news for bad news for this company, they did not have backups the second time because their backups were completely overwritten. It turned out that they actually were using like poor man's backups. They connected their backups during the week and took those backups, and they literally disconnected them over the weekend. So when they were hit with ransomware the first time, Doppelpaymer, it was over the weekend and everything got locked up except the backups. But since they got hit during the week, their backups were overwritten as well. So now they're dead in the water. The whole law firm is down. They have no email, no workstations, no nothing, gone. And at that point, they called us and we swooped in. We immediately had 2 guys on a plane to their headquarters. In the meantime, we're working with them remotely, installing threat hunting software, that kind of thing. And not only did we identify Dridex immediately and purged it from the network, we took over their IT department basically for the next 4 days, got them cleaned up. And we spotted 2 additional attacks in the next couple of days. So one was a finance employee who clicked a link in a phishing email, got her computer infected. We immediately isolated it from the network. But the bigger one was the IT manager. It turned out that the IT manager's system got infected as well because an employee had received a phishing email, sent it along to the IT manager and said, "Hey, is this legit?" And what did the IT manager do? Clicked the link in the phishing email and got his system infected, and he was running with domain admin privileges. So you wonder why they got hacked the first 2 times. So now the criminals have the system that's a domain admin. We instantly saw it, pulled it from the network, and then over the course of the next few weeks worked on with them to create a more secure foundation and infrastructure. So I was really proud of our team because not only did we find and purge the initial infection, we saved them from 2 other takeovers that could have happened, and then they haven't had a problem like this since. Yay.
Hell yeah. See, that is way more badass than mine, frankly.
I just thought when the FBI called, it was actually Deviant calling. That's why I get called all the time by the FBI about problems in my organizations and things. But since I don't work for anyone, I usually am a little suspicious. So sometimes it really is the FBI is my big takeaway, and then call Sherry and company if it really is.
It's hard to verify when it's the FBI, and often they're really vague. Like they didn't come out and say, "Hey, you're dealing with Evil Corp, and here's the IP addresses."
Yeah.
They were just like, "You might want to watch something."
So let's get to my favorite questions. Of course, the pratfalls, the face plants. What is, or it doesn't have to be as dramatic as that. Hopefully it was a lesson, I should say. What was a time when you wished you could have crossed over to the other side? So Deviant, you're going from step stools and under doors to ones and zeros, and Sherry the other way around, but you didn't quite make it. Talk about that gap. What's a time you wished? Why don't we start with you again? A time you could have gone more digital, and Sherry, then we'll ask you about a time where red team testing was a little bit of out of reach.
Sure. I mean, these are shorter stories, but I think there's great value there. So I'm really happy to be able to talk like this. I'll give you the tiny one and then one that was more fresh in my mind. So there was a time when the only one on our team who was really good at access control was Bobik. And I mean, I kind of saw what he was doing. It's like a little kid watching your parents bake, though. You just like, well, you put the powder in the bowl, and then you put the eggs in the bowl, and then you mix it. And you're not quite getting what's happening there. And you're more likely to make a mess than you are to make muffins. So there was, we were on a job, and I had cloned badges in class, like helping him teach other people. And we ran into this, company. I couldn't clone their credential, and I was subbed in on someone else's job. And I'm saying, what? It's not working. And the badge wasn't working, and it was throwing errors. And it wasn't until, I finally got back to the office. I was like, yeah, damn, it's stunk. I don't know if we have to reflash my Proxmark or something. And he's like, well, do you still have any of the data? And he looked at it, and he's like, oh, this is long prox. It's weird. It's not there's just like a different command. It's not documented super well, but like we go over it in class now. I'll teach you. And I was like, oh, really? Yeah, totally could have done it. It's nothing wrong with the Proxmark. It's fine. There was another time when we were in a company's like office again. That's where we're in data centers and offices all the time. And it's great to camp out in kind of like a conference room or meeting room, because they're this common space. Like if you sit at someone's desk and you're not, Chris Johnson, like that's weird. So if you're in a conference room or a meeting room, the most you ever have to do is deal with someone who sticks their head in, like, did you have this room? And we're like, oh yeah, it just got put on the schedule. Sorry. Did you need this room? We can be done in a few minutes. We're just on the phone with the East Coast. So we're in a conference room, and those phone systems, again, modern phone systems are often IP based. So even in offices that don't leave a lot of network jacks around active, a lot of times phone systems are something we check. There was a time, and this is partially us trusting the client, who I don't think they were trying to throw us off the case. I think they just thought they were doing more than they were. They said, oh yeah, our whole network's all MAC filtered. So, and we're like, okay, well, maybe we're not going to get it on the network. But I sat down just for fun. I tried, pulling the phone system out, little Polycom, and trying to plug in Ethernet. And sure enough, I couldn't get anything at all. I couldn't get DHCP information. Like, what's going on here? And I checked through the menus and I tried copying my Mac. And it turns out I just felt, well, shoot, guess it's not going to work. And they were doing no MAC filtering at all. They literally just didn't have DHCP. That's the only thing they didn't have on that network. It was just static IPs assigned to these machines. And I figured that if I had done any bit of network monitoring, network filtering, I've had a little, what they call the throwing star LAN tap, I could have just sniffed some packets and spotted that and not given up. But I took the client at their word, and I don't do the ones and zeros as much as someone like Sherry, and she would have found that in an instant.
Sherry?
Well, I've found myself in that situation many times, although we love to take it to the next level. Here's one where I wish we could have taken it to the next level like your team does. So we were testing how do I put this? An international retail company. So our job, and we did a lot of different types of testing for them, but one of our jobs was to do wireless network testing. And that was super fun because we got to go to the mall. How often do you get to go to the mall? Like you said, we're usually in like boring office buildings or check processing facilities, maybe occasionally a bank branch, but it's usually not that interesting. So now we're at the mall in like big cities and also in suburbia, like going from store to store testing the wireless. So we start off with an omnidirectional antenna and GPS tracking, and we're mapping how far we can see the signal from these stores, because each one of them has their own guest wireless, well, not guest, it's a wireless network. And you can see it a good ways outside the building. So we've got these cool maps. And then our job, and then we see that they're all web encrypted. And this was long after things should not have been web encrypted. This was actually not nearly long enough ago. So their networks are all web encrypted, and our job is to test and to demonstrate. This is a wireless penetration test. So we go to the store itself and start cracking packets. And by the way, for part of this, again, we have to map the wireless network. So it's really awkward to be in these stores, walking around with a laptop hanging out by like the shoe rack and being like, oh, I'm just looking online to see how much this costs on Amazon and compare, or like whatever. You have to come up with that excuse. So we go in briefly and like weird out the store managers and then leave, and then sit outside the store capturing packets. And of course, with WEP, weak encryption protocol, not really, it's wired equivalent privacy. Just to give the correct term for everybody. You capture packets, and then you're able to recover the WEP key fairly quickly, which we did. And we found a few things. Number one, that key worked at pretty much every different store we found, so we were just able to reuse it. And also, we just did a quick Nmap scan, and we figured we would just find one or two local systems. And what we found was no, we actually were able to ping hundreds, if not thousands of systems. And we started mapping the different VLANs that they were on. And it turned out that we were able to reach like all the systems at their corporate headquarters, for example, from this little store that was protected with WEP. So we get into the corporate headquarters, like from the mall, sitting outside the store, and we scan these systems, and we find one that has an administrative username and password available. Like the root, the database administrator is the manufacturer default password. It turns out that that is the facility access control system. And so with that, we have the ability to go through their system. We could print badges. We could lock people out of rooms. We could change physical access records to show when people were there and people weren't, all kinds of stuff. but that wasn't in our contract. And frankly, we don't do that all the time like your team does. We would probably fumble, like, we can make those muffins. But yeah, I really wish. I mean, it was so painful to just have to write it up as a one-liner in the report, because physical and cybersecurity are intertwined. And the goal of a pen test is to demonstrate what risks could actually become reality if a hacker were to actually break in. And we felt like we couldn't completely demonstrate that because of our contractual limitations.
All right.
Absolutely.
So go ahead. What were you saying, Dave?
Well, that's so true. That ties back in to the first story I told when they had that like emergency badge. I'm like, why does that exist? Because the type of system she found where you're like, oh my God, oh cool, Paycom, boom, I'm logged into like the physical, the PAC system. Most of those systems have what's called remote unlock, where you're like, oh, this door 21J, click remote unlock. And that's, we even told the client, we're like, why would you have what emergency do you need this badge for? Like, have the SOC do remote unlock. And they're like, well, sometimes there's only one person here at the SOC, and he can't like remote unlock and run across the parking lot. So I'm like, first of all, have more than one person in your SOC. And then he's like, well, we looked and they do have a mobile app that I'm like, don't use the mobile app. No, what are you doing?
Well, I like that too, and it's a different category of failure in the sense that it's, make sure you're scoping the contract for, yourself and the client in a way that's going to test the security and in the way that works best, is most comprehensive, or, if you want comprehensive. Sometimes that can be pretty scary, I understand too, and I've
Well,
certainly,
often these areas are run by different teams. Like physical security folks are in a totally different department from the information security professionals. And that's something that I think is kind of a hot topic in our industry right now. Like, should information and physical security live in the same department? And certainly it makes sense for those of you who contract things like pen tests. You might want to consider doing joint pen tests or having the whole thing tested at once, because I think you'll get more visibility into the risks by doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, start thinking of questions, because I'm getting toward the ends of mine. I've got a few backup ones too. So attendees, think about that. But I wanted to ask you both about a time where you were able to cross over into the other area. I've had a great time, in writing like breaking and entering or doing the pod, just kind of getting to walk in your footsteps sometimes over your shoulders. And it's amazing to travel through buildings with Devi, and it's just a totally different experience. And I feel like a citizen at a computer compared to Sherry. She just pops up the terminal window, and the numbers start flying and she's in. So I'm curious though, I haven't done a lot of shadowing you when you've crossed into the other area. So if you could each speak to that, I'd love to hear a success story there.
We should switch it up. I keep going first. I don't want
All
to.
right,
Okay.
Sherry, you're
I'll
first
open
then.
the door for you this time.
Yeah.
Well, I think where it most often happens is when I get to be a reverse cat burglar, basically. When I'm on a forensics job and we have to be super sneaky. And one example is a time in Europe. So there's a financial institution in Europe that had, I'm trying not to say too much. It was an insider threat case. There was a group of high-ranking employees that the current management believed stole very sensitive information and left and formed their own rival financial institution. And the current management wanted to collect evidence on them, but they also believed that dozens of other people were in cahoots with these guys that still worked there. So what they wanted to do was collect evidence from 70 hard drives. These are corporate hard drives within their organization workstations, and analyze those for anything related to the intellectual property theft. So that's a pretty big job. The biggest challenge is that you have to do that without anybody knowing. They wanted nobody to know that they were doing this, that they were even there, nothing. And to surreptitiously collect 70 hard drives and image them all without anyone knowing, and they wanted physical images of them. So we were like, all right, this is what you want to do, that's fine. We picked 3 nights. We got on a plane to Europe. We had all the gear with us. We took the gear in through a freight elevator during the day because we could like blend with normal traffic. And then starting at 7:30 in the evening, the building was locked. And that was abnormal. They made up some excuse for this, like, hey, we're doing like some kind of recarpeting, whatever. They also had to make sure that no janitors were around, so we picked like 2 floors each night to hit. It sounds like it's a pen test job, but again, it's a forensics job. And then we had to go from workstation to workstation. And remember, you don't want to anyone to realize that their computer has been taken and opened and imaged. We set up, for expediency, we set up 10 different imaging workstations. We needed to physically grab those drives to do it fast. If everybody has on their workstation like tchotchkes and sometimes passwords written, they had other problems, and little notes and pictures of their kids, and all that had to be in exactly the right place when we left. The other thing that kind of gave me a heart attack the whole time was that we could not mix anything up. We have 70 hard drives, and if Fred turns his computer on and it's like Sally's login, that's going to be really weird and it's going to tip somebody off. And all these are exactly the same model, that kind of thing. So we had this whole labeling process where we would label the computers out. We took over an unused office, kind of like you do, and put paper over the glass, and again, make sure that there were no janitors. By the end of the night, each night, I think it was like 5:30 in the morning was our boundary. We had to have everything completely cleaned up, and then we would just cart it away and come back the next day. So we did that. We sneaked through over a period of 3 nights, got everything imaged. Nobody's hard drives were mixed up. The only thing that would tip somebody, and we had those pictures, so we would match everything up perfectly when we finished, and it was a success. We got all those drives into the lab, and we were able to figure out who was involved in the scam, and they took it from there.
That's fantastic.
Forensics pen test. I love it.
Reverse tap burglar, because I was supposed to be there, but I was had to be really sneaky because no one was supposed to know.
Love it.
Love it. Deviant, what do you got?
So this was one of our early jobs when we started to do things on network side. It wasn't our main focus again. We were mostly just a physical services firm, but we had a contract that was scoped open enough that network was in play in that generic language kind of way that we would add in. It's not like the client asked for it, but we said, in support of physical, can we touch the network? And they say, oh yeah, sure, that's no problem. So Bobak and I are in an office building. It's late at night, and we're just, all right, nobody seems to be here. This is pretty good. We'd slipped a latch, we'd gotten in, and I'm picking a lock on this door. We got into the main, from the vestibule into the main work area, rather open office, interior stairwell that you can go up to other floors, and it's looking great. We're like, oh, nice. Client observes 9 to 5 hours. Nobody's here. This is beautiful. It was like 7 at night, so the cleaning crew, they had a cleaning crew that came in right at 5, and we'd watch them from the parking lot. We saw their van leave. We're like, this is an abandoned building. Great. We can be a little more relaxed in our posture and just be more brazen. And things like turn lights on. That's weird. Why are these lights on if one guy is at a cubicle? It's like, who's here? But we thought we were in the clear until we get up about 3 or 4 floors, and Bobak kind of finds me, because every time, again, much like Sherry said, you pick like the conference room, and that's where you dump your stuff, and that's your little base of operations, right? And I'm in the room because I'm coming back with some keys that I had stolen. I'm photographing these keys very meticulously to make duplicates later. And Bobak comes in the room. He's like, hey, were you just down that hallway? It's like, no, I've been right next to these desks right here. He's like, I just heard somebody walking around. I think someone might still be here. Don't run around like, shirtless or something, like screaming and hollering. So I wasn't gonna do that, but it's good to know. And 5-10 minutes later, I'm putting these locks back together. I disassembled a lock that I was taking pictures of the pins at this point. And Bobak's like, yeah, there's definitely someone here. Like that looks weird what you're doing. Finish that up, and then we should walk around for a minute, because we look out of place. Sure enough, put the lock back together, put it back in the door, and we walk around, and we eventually we're like, okay, down that hall. Ooh, that is definitely a light on, and I'm hearing paper shuffle. Like, okay, what do you want to do? I'm gonna go back, and do you want to do a walk by? He's like, I don't know, you're more calm and cool. You do a walk by. All right, so I just walk by the door, and the guy doesn't even look up. And I'm like, that's definitely a dude in office 406. Okay, I come back around to Bob. I'm like, there's definitely a guy in office 406. And his name was, Jim McMud whatever. Okay, he looks it up. Okay, well, that does look like this guy. He looks on LinkedIn. He's like, this guy works here. I wonder what we can do. Should we go up to him? I said, well, it's weird if we're in the building and we approach him and say, hey, what are you doing? Are you working here late too? Oh, Jim, well, you've never seen me before. That's why I'm in your building at 10 at night. Bobak said, well, I have an idea. Hang on. I found something on the network when you were walking around. So Bobak had been crawling around the network, doing what he can do. He has some network skill, as do I a little bit now. And he had found this sort of internal intranet site with a bunch of employee information and employee manuals and guidance documents and policy, almost like a company wiki, but it wasn't a wiki. And he said, there's something in here about chat tools and communication. He said, oh, look, they're using this messenger app. It looks like they coded their own messenger app or something. He's like, well, let me see if I can spin up a new login. So he actually figured out that you could create a login, and it didn't have to even be at this company's email domain. You could use any email at all. It would let you download this app they made. You could log into it. You could, he changed his username because he bypassed that. He's like, okay, well, look, it's just this configuration data in the registry. I can just change my username. So now I look like the username at this company. And he starts scrolling, looking for Jim McWhatever. He goes, oh, Jim McWhatever, look at that. And he sends a message to Jim McWhatever. And he's like, hey, Jim, this is Frank. I'm in the Chicago office. Notice it looks like your user says you're still active right now. Are you actually in the Mississippi office at the moment? Are you there in Jackson? He's like, oh yeah, I'm still here. Who are you? He's like, well, it's not about, my department does this, and we have 2 consultants who are in from California. They've been working in the building all day, and I can't get them on the phone. I don't know if your building down there, if it's built anything like ours, and Bobak's just typing that. He's like, if your building's anything like ours, like some of those meeting rooms in the middle section don't have good cell coverage. And Jim, oh yeah, I know, tell me about it. It's like, okay, well, I hate to disturb you. I don't know if you're working late because you're really in the middle of something big. Like, no, I was looking for a break. He's like, okay, look, I hate to bother you. I think they're on the 5th floor. Can you look for these 2 guys from Odin? They're Tom and Jeff, and they just have them call me. Tell them to call the Chicago, the Chicago office, because we really need a couple more questions. And okay, so now Jim McWhoever walks around the office to us, and he sees the light on in this conference room. He's like, hey, I'm sorry to interrupt. Are you the consultants from Odin? We're like, yeah, what's going on, man? I didn't think anyone was here. Were we disturbing you? He's like, no, they're not bothering me, but like Chicago has been trying to find out if you guys are still here. Apparently they still need you to check something. We're like, oh yeah, we're doing this power management. It's a greener offices initiative. We're checking power saving and making sure all the lights go out. It's been a pain in the butt walking around in the dark, just in case he saw us in the dark, It's like, oh, I totally get it. Yeah, they were talking about some tax credits for energy usage they were going to get here, I guess. But yeah, call Chicago. They're trying to reach you. If you need to use my phone, we're like, no, I mean, this room sucks, but yeah, we'll do that. Are you going to be here all night, man? He's like, no, I mean, I was thinking of leaving. I'm probably going to knock it around 11, but you guys have a good night. We're like, all right, great, thanks. So yeah, because Bobak found this back way of communicating on their network, we were super authorized because Chicago said we should.
I bet that guy, you had him wrapped around your finger.
Yeah, at that point, we were looking for a ladder actually earlier. Is there any storage? He's like, well, I mean, I think they have one in this one room, but I don't know if you can get in there. We're like, oh, we might have a key that gets us in there. We'll check. So yeah, he saw us walking around later with a ladder, crawling into ceilings, checking wires. And as he was leaving, he's like, all right, well, don't work too hard, fellas.
I'll call that a success for sure. Yeah, and I mean, again, it just shows that these things that can feel like just totally different specialties or training areas on the job are just different tools that you're using, and they're used in tandem. It'd be like being trained in having eyes and not ears, in some cases. So I want to invite, I don't know, I want to make sure I'm not seeing any. I want to make sure that, if you guys are seeing one, if I have different privileges, that are there.
2 questions, Jeremy.
So I might need you to choose my questions for me, since I'm not.
I'm making you an organizer also, but yes, we have 2 questions. One is, have you ever audited the process of revoking credentials from an executive/VIP? Did it go well or poorly? So Deviant, I'll toss that one over to you first.
Fortunately, we've never had to audit it live. There's a lot of emotional work that you have to do when someone higher up is going to get spanked for some reason, whether it's them being walked to the door or them just being told that their child is ugly. But yeah, there's a lot of emotional management that goes into telling this person, like, hey, the things you expect is not what's actually happening here, and you got to realize blah, blah. So fortunately, we never had to revoke and verify revocation of an exec credential. We did have a guard force that they had so much sort of turnover on the guard force, which is very common for a lot of guard companies and security firms. They weren't actually enrolling all of the guards into the badge system. They just had generic guard badges, and they would trade them off each shift. So every guard had permissions everywhere, and they were all the same. They were just clones of the same badge, basically. So you couldn't really tell which guard went where, so you couldn't audit it at all. And we explained to them, we're like, look, well, we sniffed one of your badge credentials and we copied it onto a few blank cards. We copied it onto my hand because I have an embeddable in my hand, which is a whole other story that I'll tell you all if you want later. And yeah, we were like, look, you really can't do that. You're shooting yourself in the foot a number of ways. And I understand it's a headache to enroll all these sort of part-time workers, but being able to demonstrate the impact we could do using these badges around the whole building, and no one could actually tell it was us. They're like, the only thing they could tell, because we've had other jobs where we've stolen a guard badge, but it's unique to that guard. And the SOC even said, like, that was weird. I noticed that the other night you guys were in the building because I saw like Cheryl's badge kept showing up in use. And I was like, she was on earlier, like she went home at 5. And I said, did you send anyone out? He's like, no, I mean, we're busy. We just thought they weren't red alerts. They were just access granteds. We figured she must have come back for something, but this company couldn't even do that.
Wow.
I've heard you speak to that issue too, Sherry, of just if you can't audit, you just have so little visibility in the back end, going back at it.
Yeah, and I'd also love to speak to this because we see major issues, not so much when an executive leaves, but when a senior IT person leaves. We actually handle a lot of those cases, like worker separation cases, especially if there's been a termination involved. In fact, we had a major transportation company that had a very, very senior IT person leave that had been at the organization forever. And they came to us and were like, what do we need to do? Like, this guy just got fired. We're pretty sure that he has like some hard drives and stuff at his house that we may have that might have our data on it. Can he come in remotely? And so we have a checklist that we go through with companies when a senior level IT person leaves, and we were able to get it buttoned up, but they actually had to enlist the help of law enforcement as well to get some of their stuff back.
Wow.
So here's a question. It's about, techniques. Your pen tests are obviously using techniques that black hats use as well. And I'm going to slightly rephrase the question, but is there, I guess I have two categories. I'm having a little trouble, just this question, there's two ways to kind of understand it, I think. One is, are there common kinds of companies that are attacked overwhelmingly versus people are in other words, are people attacking a category of company predominantly, or is a specific company being targeted? And I guess that's actually the question, like how many targets are, specific for a, specific place for a specific reason versus going for a larger industry, or just seeing what doors are open and going through those open doors. Is
To
that
add to
clear?
that, it looks like they're asking about the techniques as well. Is that right?
Yeah.
So do you
Yeah,
use
yeah.
the same techniques on every kind of company, or are there certain techniques used on certain companies?
Yeah.
So Devian, I'll let you.
How targeted or how general this is, yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like I might be quoting the wisdom of Sherry, who says things like this. I would be willing to venture a guess that very few companies, there are companies that are targeted, but for the most part, criminals are just casting a wide net. And I think the distinguishing feature between companies is there's only some companies that are actually even postured in a way that they can figure it out. And the only other question is just how exploitable are the companies once the criminals knock on the door?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's true for the majority of companies. I can tell you the companies that hire us there's a higher percentage of them that actually are being targeted,
Oh,
either because, maybe they're a defense contractor, or because they're working on some important medical thing, or, whatever it is. And so we do see companies that are targeted for whatever reason by nation state attackers. But by and large, the overwhelming majority of criminals are after money. And you can see that in the recent data breach investigations report. And, every company has money, every company has employee social security numbers. And the techniques that are used tend to work over and over and over again. It's phishing emails. God, when that started ramping up in 2005, I never thought that 15 years later it would still be an issue, because we have the technology to protect against it. We just don't deploy it. And then passwords. Again, I never thought 15 years later that we would still be relying on like fluffy 1984 to protect us from attackers.
yeah.
And I would think in the different areas of expertise, it would be different too. Obviously, on the digital domain, automated, penetration, just looking, casting as wide a net and seeing what's open and available would be efficient and easy. I would think on the physical end, people aren't necessarily just turning every doorknob in a downtown area. So I assume that for a physical, even on the attacker end, it's usually more targeted. Is that naive of me, or would you say that's right, Dee?
In some instances, this is one of the main reasons where with all of our clients, we do a little threat modeling workshop with them first. And it's part of our initial process to say, look, are you concerned about opportunistic street criminals, or are you concerned about, someone who's more street hardened, like maybe someone who once worked for an alarm installer, which there are some people out there. There's people in the trades who kind of just like apprentice electricians, where you hire one electrician and they're Johnny Reputable Corp, and they show up with two other guys, and you're like, that looks like prison ink on one of them. Like, they're sort of extra support labor, and there are companies that kind of just don't vet their support staff. So we've seen what we'll call hardened criminals, or people with this trade knowledge. Or are you talking about corporate espionage or even nation state risks? And those are very different calibers of threat. And whether, the opportunistic street criminal, certainly that's Silicon Valley. If you've been around a lot of California is this amazing mix of very complex social factors, where there's tremendous wealth and tremendous affluence of these companies side by side with a lot of people who are struggling, desperate. And the idea of like somebody just wanders into the tech company with their giant open office plan and steals a bunch of stuff, or causes, an incident. Sometimes they just want to get out of the freaking weather, and there's free food in the snacks room, but I'm very sympathetic. But that's the idea of opportunistic crime. It literally is people just trying a lot of doors. So a
Yeah.
lot of our downtown San Francisco audits are like, yeah, well, people with a string and a bump key could like get into this. Don't do that maybe. Versus, major media firms, or a media firm operating in Asia, and their concern is literally like China. So those are very different types of threats.
So, couple cultural questions, and then both internal and external. So I'll ask the internal first. Um, so in breaking and entering, this is a question I think based on that. We note that I kind of tell the story early in Sherry's company. In a win, when you pawn somebody, you would say the testers would play "You're the best around" from the Karate Kid. So that became tiresome because you were so successful. It was sort of playing nonstop often, but just sort of culturally, internally, what's one way you celebrate, if you do today, or if you've gotten to the point where it's so corporate and routine and professional that's not a way to sort of notch a win. I'll start with you, Deviant. You're not, I know you have many celebratory practices, so I'll just ask what's one of them on the job if you have one.
I can't. How could I ever top a winning soundtrack? Now I need to make like a special Pandora station.
If I could jump in, that song was the reason for my first HR manual when the company was, because I heard it so much. It was like, okay, guys, you can play it a maximum of 3 times per person per day. And I don't want to hear it beyond that. And it's in our manual. It was one of like 3 things that I put in our manual first. So yes, we've evolved.
Yes, that's sometimes you need an HR manual for just these reasons. This is like why we have city governments form, because we have to start having public hygiene systems. So externally, in other words, for your clients, how do you improve the security mindset of a company? We had a question sort of, if you have a Fortune 500 company, they have a token, lip service to security, but if people come forth with real issues, it's seen as a threat and they're shot down or even, seen as a bad actor. So how do you kind of make the case, say you're inside the company, to help change the internal culture to respect security as a positive, testing as a positive?
I've never had an answer for that. I don't think you do.
Mm,
I think it either has to come from the top or it has to come from, they have to want to change. Otherwise, I mean, I don't know if you're comfortable kind of acknowledging this reality, Sherry. We have, and this is something I've talked about in other presentations, that again, going back to emotional work, sometimes as a tester, you set foot in a turf war where
mm,
one element in the company is just trying to get ammo. I don't want to think maliciously to like make that department look bad, but they've been screaming at the wind for a year or more and no one's listening, and they need a club just to swing in a meeting. So many times your work, and that's something that honestly, this is a really amazing thing. Bobak really is so mindful and so very emotionally literate. We were on a job with a client. It was a very jovial environment. They liked us. They just thought we were the cat's pajamas, and they're laughing it up and slapping on our backs as we're walking. Because it was a walkthrough assessment. We're just demonstrating things going the way they shouldn't. Doors popping open, and every time we do it, it's funnier and funnier to them. And they're taking out their own cell phones, because we'll do a proper with cameras like documentation for the write-up and the videos, but they're taking out personal cell phones and recording. And at one point, I had popped a door and they laugh it up and they're stuff like, ha ha. And it was like, I kind of just had my sunglasses and I was like, yeah, that door. And the one guy was like recording on his cell phone. Now that's never going to be part of an official deliverable, right? But that got shared a little bit on the internal network. And Bobak was like, what if the installer who saw you exploit that door was like in a meeting? What if somebody who was an executive and thought that was his domain? Like he described it as, we have to be runway models. Runway
mm.
models are very stoic in their face because you're not there to see, you're there to see the dress. He was like, let the vuln speak for itself. You are professionally demonstrating it, bam, 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 so that no matter who sees your deliverable and no matter who sees this information, it's not interpreted as poking fun at somebody. Even, it's really wise the way you said that.
That is so important. I'm glad you said that. I feel like that's part of the maturation of our industry, because you can tell when someone's fairly new because they might openly celebrate, like, yes, I have a win, or laugh, or things like that. But every time we succeed, it's a failure. And I think we have to be really conscious of that. And like you're saying, let the vulnerability speak for itself. And ultimately, all security issues are people issues. I kind of joke, but it's true that we're organizational therapists,
Yeah.
because really, like, you get everyone in the room for a tabletop exercise and you have to be like, kumbaya, everybody, let's get along and let's see where our differences are, executives and IT. And, by the end, it's really, you need people to communicate and get along, and you will have a more secure organization and listen to each other.
So we may have time for one more after this, but if not, this is kind of a cool way to kind of think about, especially with a training mindset, because I want to, remember also that you're talking about this in such a hands-on way in your class ahead. But this was a question for Sherry, but it can be flipped to go to either of you. This is someone who has been using friends as guinea pigs for physical pen testing, but wants to branch into the digital network side. So how do you how do you find a domain to practice in when you're there? And I could easily imagine people on the other side where they're like, yeah, I'm typing plenty of stuff on a keyboard, doing some sniffing, but Deviant, how do I get more practice on the physical side? So, uh, how can I get training / experience to do what you do is the way I'll summarize that. Sherry, do you want to go first?
Sure. Well, we've always had what I call a play network at the company since the very beginning. It's just originally it was like a bunch of computers. I still have like a stack of 40 super old computers that we would use to just hack into and play with. And I think even today that's relevant. You need people to be able to play. Even before you become a professional, grab yourself a copy of a Kali Linux, Nmap, Nessus. Don't run it on real world systems. Make your own little network. That's good experience too, because you'll be a better cybersecurity professional if you have that blue team experience. So set up your own little small business network and then hack it and log it and monitor it and see, like, if I brute force it, what am I going to see in the logs? What am I not going to see? So yeah, I think it's really important to play around and to take initiative and to learn to use these tools.
Yeah, there is no substitute for having room to have fun. And many of us almost bemoan the loss of spaces that used to exist for that for teenagers and curious kids in the physical realm. Like, many people used to be able to explore parts of buildings. I remember going on, trips with my parents, and I'd be 12, 11, 13. I would leave the hotel room at night. They say, stay in the building, because a lot of hotels had arcades or something in the lobby. But I would go to like other floors, just walking around, checking out. Maybe I'd feel amazing if I could get into the stairwell that would like lead to the roof, but I wouldn't, know how to get to the roof. But I was like somewhere that you don't go.
In
And
a
then I became,
sub-basement.
18, 19, 20, and I would start getting on the roof. And then you become, mid 20s, you start getting into tunnels and in other weird places that are a little more risque. But
This is not a life path that everybody took.
yeah, but nowadays that doesn't really exist as an opportunity, both because of increased liability. If you get caught, you're not just told, hey, kid, get out of here. Like, you're actually facing problems. And because monitoring has become so cheap, like there's just cameras on everything now. And even if you're not going to get caught in the moment, which is probably you're not, but someone might reconstruct it later. And again, then you just get a phone call later and you're talking to law enforcement. So the idea of a play area, Red Team Alliance, we have our Phoenix and our Virginia facilities, and frankly, the Virginia facility, which is multiple floors now of an old distillery. We're on the corner of Bourbon Street and Gin Alley, which we just like a lot. So like, there's our classroom, sure, and there's a lot of stuff in that classroom, but a floor below it is just an office. Like, it was a full office space that was originally, it's this old brick building, so you can't move the walls that much, and nobody wanted. That's why we got this building. We said, and this is because all these little offices, little 10 by 10 and 12 by 12 offices, and you're like, who would ever want these tiny offices? Well, we do, because every office is a different access control system, a different lock, a different door mechanism, and we just let people go to town with real installations.
This sounds so awesome. And your virtual class that you're running, you give people hands-on experience in that as well. Is that right? How do you
Yes.
do that?
So the notion is everyone, as long as they promise to return it to us, or they will be charged, we have basically building in a box, badge system in a box solutions, so that when we are sent, because everyone gets equipment in many classes, yours are no exception, and ours as well. Like, here's your test credentials, and here's your, Proxmark that you're using. But it's kind of like, okay, I clone the credential, like there it is, yay. Versus if we have this little building in a box on everyone's desk, they can actually present credentials and see if the light turns green, and you're interacting with a real badge reader at that point. You're taking a real credential reader off the wall.
Well, I'm lucky enough to live in Montana, and there's amazing, whitewater guides and training classes. And I always say you should just charge twice as much and call it camp as much as for training. So I think you should just call it, lockpicking camp, and just send the same equipment with the same exact class. And if you call it fun, you can have kids of all ages. Thank you guys so much. It's been so amazing. Thank you all for attending. A few housekeeping notes as we close. Again, please check out, Deviant's books, Sherry's books, check out Breaking and Entering, and the Hacker Next Door podcast, and check out the class, obviously, if you want to have these crossover skills, either or both classes. And that's going to link to sort of register for that is going to be emailed to you along with the survey at the end. Is there anything else you'd add in closing?
We'll be sending out the video for this as well. So that's the
and the video as well. So resources and experiences to be had Thank you all for your great questions, and thank you guys for the time today.
Excellent. Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody. Thanks a lot. See ya.